Good evening, or good morning, and welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. Let's bow in. So tonight, we continue working our way through the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma, and we're up to the chapters on meditation. Tonight we're doing chapters 25 and 26. First one being about posture, and the second having to do with working with the out-breath. The main point about posture is that we can take a really terrific, good erect posture, erect spine, and that this is in the tradition is called having a good head and shoulders. And automatically, just by taking the posture, one becomes more alert. It's as though this posture itself, having an erect back and the way we sit on the cushion, helps our mind automatically come present, and we become more alert, more confident. He says you feel uplifted and overcome drowsiness and laziness, aggression, and the desire to take time off or to escape from the Dharma. All these are overcome when you take a good posture. And I find it's really true. It's something each person has to experiment with. That when you sit, the first thing that you should do after the bell rings is to check your posture. You can do a quick body scan. And you can look for points of tension. Depending on which particular meditation posture you're using, you might have different areas of tension, but common ones are the lower belly. And you can relax your lower belly. And you can check your neck, like this, for any tension in your shoulders. And then we often hold tension in our faces. Common places are the forehead and the eyes and the cheeks and the mouth. And you can just check that and relax it. And as you do it, you become very erect, relaxed, and alert. And it's really almost magical how having a good posture can affect one's state of mind. And this applies not only on the meditation cushion, but in our daily lives as well as we walk down the street. And when we slouch like this, it's sort of sad and complainatory, and it allows us sort of to let go of our crisp, alert awareness and devolve into thought, which is often driven by anxiety and might be complainatory. He says, slouching is giving in to neurosis, which we call setting sun. That's a Shambhala term, setting sun, as opposed to the rising sun or the great eastern sun. The rising sun is always fresh, it's always new. Everything is happening newly. In the setting sun, everything is sort of worn. We've done it before. We're complainatory, we're sad, we're concerned about ourselves, setting sun mentality. So when you slouch, that's the kind of mentality one gives into. It's sort of like, well, I'll do anything. Anything's okay, as opposed to being alert. Sometimes we call this slouching the oy vey posture. That's a New York term. It's like oy vey, like that. So it's terrific I think even in the course of the middle of the day, to take a good posture can cheer you up and make you more alert and awake in the present moment. It's interesting that in the Zen tradition, posture is even more important than it is in the Tibetan. It's as though when you take a good posture, you are becoming the Buddha. You're assuming the posture of the Buddha, the posture of awakening. And just simply by doing that, you become the Buddha. Interestingly, there's a lot in here that I never come across before. So, for instance, Trungpa Rinpoche recommends not, and I don't think anybody here is doing this, but taking a cushion and putting it between your legs and kneeling on it. It's kind of like you're riding a horse. And he recommends against that. He prefers the Gamden to a Zafu. But really, it's a matter of personal preference. And the point is, how are you going to be the most comfortably erect with a straight spine? The hallmark of good posture is a straight spine, as though if you were to take a plumb line, that's a line with a weight on the end of it, and you were to drop it through your fontanelle, it would come out your coccyx. You have a really good straight, and your shoulders are back, like this. Now, oftentimes it's very difficult. People don't know that they're doing this, and it's very tricky. You can try and police yourself for that. And the key for that, or the cure for that, is to tuck your chin just a little bit. You don't want to make it extreme, but you tuck it a little bit. And that'll help cure that tendency we all have, or many of us have, to do this. The other cure is that if you work with someone else who's checking posture, they can tell you, because it's really hard to know when you're doing it. Everybody can see nods here. Now, one interesting thing that he's talking about is how to handle your mouth. And, the classic posture that we don't have to do, you can sit with your mouth closed, but if you are going to imitate the Buddha, and that's really what posture is about, you have your lips slightly parted. If you notice any statues of the Buddha, the lips are slightly parted. And especially when you do that, then it's necessary to place the tongue just behind the front teeth. Good idea to do it anyhow. And what he says is very interesting is that you can breathe through both your nose and your mouth. I tend to just sit and breathe through my nose. But you can breathe through the mouth exclusively, and you can breathe through both. And that seems to be what he's recommending in this chapter. Both. He says, it is not mystical or magical. The idea is to be a complete human being. In order to imitate the Buddha, you start with posture. And it is very helpful in your meditation practice. Any comments about this before we go on? We could sort of do this as a rolling discussion. Yes, Lane. Oh, good. Mike.
Yes, about breathing through both the mouth and nose simultaneously. Does he actually mean simultaneously? In my experience, it's not possible. It's either one or the other.
No, you can do it both. Try it.
Yeah, I have. There's like a switch in our passage that it's either one or the other.
Well, then maybe there's just some people who have the ability and others who don't. I don't know. Okay. Because I know I can. Not that I do. I usually just breathe through my nose. But, I can easily do it. I'm doing it right now. Through both. Yeah. Anybody else? It's an experimental thing. I think the most important part is that you're aware of your posture, and you are sitting very erect. Now, it's fine to sit in a chair. That's what I'm doing right now. And then if you sit in a chair, it depends a lot on the chair, the extent to which you have to use the back. Ideally, you don't use the back, but it depends a lot on the chair. It can help to use that wedge-shaped cushion. We have one somewhere, it doesn't matter. But there's a wedge-shaped cushion that'll help you sit more erect in a chair. And the main thing about sitting in a chair is to have your feet flat on something, depending on, actually there are some people, nobody in this room is short enough to need that underneath them, but oftentimes there are people who do. And then in terms of postures, he recommends against sitting on the edge of the gomden. But there is a posture that really requires you to do that, and that is that if you use what is sometimes called the Zen novice posture, where you are placing your shins flat on the floor with your ankles pretty much in front of each other, then you have to come forward on the cushion. And you will find on a gomden that you are sitting on the edge, and it's fine. It's a very, very stable position to sit in that posture. But if you're just sitting cross-legged, or if you're sitting in half lotus, or if you're sitting in full lotus, there are very few people around who can do that, then the idea is to sit, if you're using a cushion, to sit in the center of the cushion. Yes,
yeah,
Joe.
This one. It's I don't know if it was because I spent the past few months recovering and everything, and it's been horizontal. But I've noticed it's called turkey necking.
Yeah, turkey, that's what I was talking about, the turkey neck.
And I noticed my posture the past week or two has been really terrible. And when I opened the book to read the chapters, I was like, oh, this is meant to be for this week for me. This
Right.
is perfect timing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was really very aware of it sitting here. I had to keep it adjusting myself to it.
Right.
Shoulders back.
Rochelle. Thank you.
Also, an Alexander teacher once told me to, when you place your tongue behind your top teeth, the front teeth, and then you relax your jaw. Because a lot of times people tighten their jaw or they clench their jaw. Just relax your jaw and relax your neck.
Yeah, turkey neck. I hadn't thought I heard that expression. That's very descriptive. Like that. I mean, oftentimes in a large group sitting, I can just look around and I can see people doing that, And the fact is that they don't know it until someone adjusts them, or if they could see themselves in a mirror. It's hard to know. So then he gives some general guidelines for meditation practice. Having a sense of space, that we feel the space that we're in. We let our awareness relax in this environment of space. We can actually let our awareness expand right out to the walls. And then eventually, you just let it expand, period. You don't even think of the walls, but you can use that as a technique. He talks about relaxing the gaze. And the classic position is that where your eyes are open, and this is Buddhist meditation practice, and really we're doing is Vipashyana practice, or Shamatha Vipashyana. We're not doing the most beginning practice. And he strongly recommends against, closing your eyes and then watching the breath going in and out, which is the very beginning practice. And the reason is that it concentrates your awareness in your body and gives you more of a sense of self, of me, I doing it, and creates tension and effort and a feeling of criticism and judgment about how well we're doing it. So what we're doing is we're opening the eyes, and the classic instruction is that you direct your gaze in a very relaxed manner about 6 feet down at the ground, sort of a 45-degree angle, to start. And your gaze is not hyper-focused, it's not really swimmy and blurry, it's just completely relaxed, ordinary, and you don't really care what you're seeing. You might be seeing all different things depending on what's in front of you. If you're sitting in a crowded room with a lot of other people, you might be looking at someone else's bottom or back or something, and that's fine. You don't worry about it. You just let your eyes go. Now later on, what? My feet crossed? Huh? Yeah. Later on, you can raise your gaze and you can look at the horizontal. And this is what you're beginning to do here is imitate life, when you walk down the street, you're not staring down at the pavement. Your eyes are at the horizontal, more or less, looking around because you're constantly being aware. I'm very much liking this book, Our Pristine Mind by Organ Chowang. And we're teaching a course on it up at Westchester Buddhist Center. And it's amazing. It's the most subscribed course we've ever taught. We've got over 60 people signed up for this one course. It's because the book is so accessible and popular. And a friend of mine, Organ Chowang, Kenpo Organ Chowang, he's a Nyingma teacher. And Kenpo is kind of like having the title of PhD after your name. He's done a lot of study. And he, this past weekend, taught a program at Omega. And several people I know went. And he, interestingly, recommended something I've never done, and I've been trying it out, and I like it a lot. He recommended that when you sit, after a while, after you've been sitting, everyone here is pretty much a practitioner, you might try not only raising your gaze to the horizontal, but you could actually look up and practice that way. You could look up and to the right. You could look down and to the right. You could look over to the left and, in different places and just practice, having it's to achieve sort of flexibility of posture. And it's really very interesting. You can see when you try to do that how grooved you've gotten into whatever your normal practice is of looking down or looking at the horizontal, or, it's like one becomes habituated. So I think it's an excellent idea to try sitting, looking over there. It's really funny. Why not? Placing the hands. And here in our tradition, we use two mudras. This one is the classic one. It's called, oftentimes called the begging bowl mudra. Or in this book, he called it, what did he call it? The cosmic mudra, right? You know it as a cosmic mudra? Mm-hmm. And you can do that. The other one that we use more in the Kagyu tradition, he calls it relaxing the mind mudra, which is so simple. It's just you put your palms on your thighs like this. Now, the way in which you position them is I can't do it in this chair very well, but you drop your arms to your side, and then you just bend them at the elbows until they come down on your palms, on your thighs. But if you now one of the guidelines when you sit on a cushion is that your knees should be no higher than your hips, preferably lower than your hips. And if your knees are higher than your hips, you'll tend to feel like you're falling back, like this. And so then the tendency is to bring your arms forward and wrap your hands around your knees to pull yourself upright. So that's kind of a telltale that your knee, what you need to do is to get more height under your bottom and use more cushion so that your knees are at the level or lower than your hips. And then you won't feel this need to wrap your hands around your knees and to pull yourself. So it creates a lot of tension. So this posture is just very simple. Hands on the thighs. Any questions or comments about this? So then he talks about breathing through both the nose and the mouth. And if you can't do both at once, you still, for variety and for sort of flexibility, you might try, if you've always been breathing through your nose, try breathing through your mouth for a practice session, Switch it back and forth, just to avoid becoming rigid. Because the idea is to be able to practice awareness in any situation. He says, have a sense of openness and uprightness. You should feel as though you are projecting out, as if you were a universal monarch or an enlightened one. You should also listen to Dharma talks in this way. And you can do this in everyday life. So this whole thing about the posture, you see, it's a great way to listen to a Dharma talk, because you're assuming this very dignified, alert, erect posture. It's a terrific way to go through life, you know? Just as you walk down the street, as you meet friends and people, because you're not being rigid, you're being awake. It's like a great gesture of generosity. You're offering your open mind, really. And this is something I've never done. He says, begin and end each session by checking your posture. That's a terrific piece of advice, I think, that you could end your session by checking your posture as well. I've found over the years, posture is so much more important than I ever would have thought it was. I've seen lots of nods here. It's almost magical that when you assume a good posture, your mind follows along and is uplifted. Then he talks about breathing out. First, you let your vision rest, and wherever your eyes are. You don't focus the eyes, intently. You don't go all swimmy. And if, for instance, you have some visual hallucination, this is more common of beginners, is that maybe the floor will start moving, especially if it's a patterned floor, like a carpet or something like that. And then they'll come to a meditation instructor and say, am I having some kind of profound experience? I'm actually seeing, things change and move. And it's just a visual hallucination. And the instructor will say to the student, don't worry, it'll stop, which can also often be very disappointing. So you let your breath flow naturally. You don't control it at all. And if you've just climbed a flight of stairs and you're breathing rapidly, that's fine. You work with that. After a while, after you've been sitting for a while, your breath will slow down a lot. That's fine. You just work with that. And here he's saying, in this chapter, he's advising us to label our thoughts, thinking. That's a practice that you can do or not, as you wish. In this chapter, he's recommending it. But in other instances, he's said to us that it's a practice that you can drop. I mean, you're not going to walk down the street labeling your thoughts, thinking. You can do that on your cushion. But if you want to prepare more for the street, then you stop doing it. So you can go back and forth. It's helpful because sometimes we just fall into dream and we're thinking, and we don't even notice it. So by labeling our thoughts, thinking, we tend to become a little bit more alert and aware of what's going on in our minds. Any comments about that or advice from your experience? He enjoins us to be precise. And he says, as the breathing goes out and begins to reach beyond you, there is space, the space of the present moment, of this time, of this place. Everything is arising and passing away in space. We're not talking about whether things exist or not. We're talking about the immediacy of our experience in the present moment. It's a constant changing movie that is taking place in the space of our awareness. We're constantly seeing different ones of the six knowables, objects of sight, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and mental events. And all of them in the present moment are just constantly arising and passing away in space. They arise out of space and they're passing away in space. I make this gesture and it arises and passes away in space. These words come out of my mouth in space and disappear back into space. Space is the container. It's the environment. So you just keep breathing out and dissolving the breathing in the space. And he says, so it is out, rest, out, rest. The breath goes out, and at the end, there's just rest. and there's a sense of rest. It's really pretty terrific, that sense of ease that we can have as we follow the breath out, and at the end it's gone, it dissolves, and then there's a gap. This is important, that we breathe out, we follow the breath out, and the idea is that you become one with the breath. He doesn't say that in this chapter, but in other places. And what it means to become one with the breath is that there's just the breath. And what you do is you let go of the watcher. That's the one who's saying, am I doing it? Am I not doing it? Am I doing it well? Am I doing it badly? Am I doing it like other people do it? Oh, what's for lunch? And that watcher keeps up a running commentary. And you let go of that, and when there's just the breath, then you could say you have become one with the breath. And there's no two. There's just the breath. And he says you just put the emphasis on the out. See, when you breathe in, and if you follow it in, then suddenly there's this awareness of me. But when you breathe out and you let go, the breath goes out and it dissolves into the space, there's a letting go. And there's a relaxing and a letting go of I and of effort and of sort of egotistical self-concern. Whereas when you breathe in and you follow it in, then there's more of a tendency to think, how am I doing? Am I doing a good job? Am I doing a bad job? And then you get into all kinds of thoughts about oneself. And he says, and while you are practicing, you should not think about what you're going to get out of meditation. Like that has to do with this going out and the dissolving of the breath, and there's just tremendous relaxation. And then he talks about 25%, and in other places he called it 25-75. And what that means is as we sit here, we're aware of the whole environment, and then the breath goes out like a highlight, like a line drawn on a piece of paper, or like a line drawn on water. You know how you draw a line on water with your finger, and you can see the line, and then it dissolves, and the surface of the water heals and becomes smooth again? Well, the breath goes out into this space. We're aware of the space. 75% of our awareness, this is figurative, right? Nobody's counting. But it's sort of like the majority of your awareness is right here in the room. And then there's this highlight, like a line drawn on a piece of paper, the breath going out. That's the 25%. Any questions about this? No? It seems everybody's got it. It's obvious. He says, and then a gap. You don't have to be aware of anything. The breath goes out, it dissolves, and then a gap. Then you breathe out again. Out, dissolve, gap. You can be aware of the breath of your lungs as well in this process. You don't have to just be aware of the breath as it comes out of your nostrils. You can be aware of, you can feel the whole feeling of it coming up, from your lungs and out your nose, and it goes out and it dissolves, and at the end there's this gap. Another way of putting it is, you go out, at the end there's just a rest, nothing to do. Go out. Sometimes he says you just dissolve. Or what I like is you go out, you've been doing something, you go out, it dissolves, and then there's a pause. Just take a pause. And where are you? It's right here. It's like our minds stop right here in the present. Go out, the breath dissolves into the space, and then there's a pause, or he calls it a gap. Now that gap, by the way, he doesn't talk about this in this chapter, but in other places, it's the beginning of the awareness of emptiness, of shunyata, of this open space, open dimension of being without I and other, without intentionality and purpose, egotistical purpose. So that's why that gap at the end is so key, important. I think of it as a pause. I find it more helpful to say the breath goes out, dissolves, and then there's just a pause. Short, You don't want to pause so long that then you're out of breath and you have to gasp, to get some air in. And then he says this. So the sitting practice of meditation is basically out breath, dissolve, gap. Out breath, dissolve, gap. Out breath, dissolve, gap. Sometimes people say, well, I can't stop being aware of my in-breath. Don't worry, just think about out breath, dissolve, gap, it'll come. And then there'll be times when you are aware again of the in-breath, it's fine, who cares? And then you go out breath, dissolve, gap. Or pause. That's the mantra. Out breath, dissolve, gap. It says the out-breath is connected with the idea of letting go. And you develop mindfulness as you let go. What does that mean? You develop mindfulness as you let go. The thing is this, that when you go out, you're aware of the environment, right? And there's this highlight going out into it, like a line. That's the breath. It goes out, dissolving, and then there's a pause. And what happens in that pause? There's just this. You are completely here. There's a mindfulness. You give up any kind of intentionality in that moment of gap, of pause. And there's tremendous presence, can be. That's the mindfulness he's talking about. That we're just right here. Let's just, any comments about that? Let's talk about that for a minute. I think that's probably, to me, that seems to me the most profound part of this whole technique. The breath goes out. There's a giving, there's a generosity in following the breath out. You're giving up ego, dissolving as it goes, just like a line drawn on water, dissolving as it goes. And at the end, this gap, one finds oneself present. Can. Any yeses, nos? Okay.
I find myself more present when breathing out in an actual gap.
Then in the actual gap?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, you just experiment with it. Yeah. Okay.
It's as if the exhale is the actual dissolving.
Think of it.
The process of the exhale is the dissolving.
Yeah. I think of it less as a gap, which sounds almost sort of. One wonders what a gap in what. What's the gap? Think of it as a pause, and then just pause. You don't have to do anything. See what happens. Pause. He says a miniature leap is involved. He used to talk a lot about taking a leap because you're letting go of reference point. That's what happens at the end there, in that pause, in that gap. You're giving up reference point. Reference point saying, where am I? I'm here, I'm there. Defining it. You give that up. You just complete relaxation. And then he gives us criticism for both in and out. I mean, it's a practice that one does, following the breath in and out, especially in the beginning, the pure shamatha. One sits, one closes one's eyes. It's very interior. You follow the breath in and out. And as Organ Choang says, the virtue of that practice is twofold. This beginning practice of eyes closed, interior, following the breath in and out. On the one hand, it shows beginners the extent to which they're thinking. Because what they discover is it's very hard to stay with the in and out breath. And it shows everybody their monkey mind, which most people have no idea that they're so lost in thought. I had a friend who was a brilliant psychoanalyst. He's dead now. And he spent his life doing nothing but groups. And I just loved Lou, and everybody loved Lou. All his group participants, and a lot of them became psychotherapists and then became practitioners of the technique he invented. And he was one of 6 fellows of the American Psychological Association in the last years of his life. And I remember talking to him about this one time, and him saying to me, shocking me actually, by saying, yeah, he said, it's really terrible how most people spend their lives lost in reflection. And I'm sitting here thinking, you don't? You know? And I don't think he did. I think he was just really awake, alive, you know. He was this person, he had tremendous insight. Everybody who knew him felt like, you know, he just had X-ray vision. He could see what was going on inside you. And yet he always spoke to the best in people. He thought, you know, he loved to speak to that. So it made him much loved. He says, if you follow both in and out, it becomes too linear. It's hard work, ambitious. Then we might become really ambitious meditators. We want to become relaxed meditators. I mean, this practice that we're doing, especially working with the out-breath and going out, this comes out of the Dzogchen tradition, the Great Perfection tradition. I mean, this whole style in this particular way. And the Great Perfection is often called the path for the lazy man, a lazy person, you know, as opposed to the other lower jhanas, which take a lot more work. You know, this is the path of laziness. The laziness is you just rest in awareness. They're constantly enjoining us to rest in the natural state, to rest in mindfulness. Yes, Michelle.
Open, spacious, and relaxed.
Beautiful.
That's what Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltso always says.
Open, spacious, and relaxed.
And whenever we do meditation, he always says, relax, relax.
Yeah. There's a chant that I do. It's a bodhicitta chant. And it says, Ho, so that all beings may dissolve temporary confusion. That's the first line. And what confusion is the idea of me and my struggle and my survival. And it's temporary because it comes and goes. You know, that feeling of me and my peril and my effort and ambition. So that all beings may dissolve temporary confusion and self-liberate in the wisdom awareness of perfectly pure, original, basic space. And self-liberate. You see, self-liberate, when you watch a thought, it just dissolves. That's the self-liberation. Any thought about I self-liberates if you just let it be without chaining it and building onto it. It will just, if you bring it to awareness, it self-liberates. It just goes poof into space. So in order that all sentient beings may dissolve temporary confusion and self-liberate in the wisdom awareness, that's this intelligence of this space, of basic, self-liberate in the wisdom awareness of, of original basic space. That's the space. I will arouse bodhicitta, awakened mind. That's what we're doing. So that, how does it go? Now I'm forgetting the last time. So in order that all sentient beings may dissolve temporary confusion and self-liberate in the wisdom awareness of perfectly pure original basic space, I will arouse bodhicitta. I can't remember. No.
Email us.
Huh? I'll email it. But the last line basically is, and rest, and rest in perfect mindful awareness. It's words to that effect, which is pure Dzogchen. It's pure Mahamudra and pure Zen.
In the natural state.
Huh?
In the natural state. In the natural state.
And self-liberate and rest in the natural state. This is the natural state. It's amazing. That's what we are born with. It's really beautiful. So, finally, Let's see. He wants us to have a very light touch. Says, talks begin about the 25% of awareness on the breath. Seems to be about right, he says.
Because it's an awareness practice. It's an awareness practice, not a concentration practice. So you're not just concentrating on a candle or an object. It's an awareness.
Exactly. And we should pass the mic. Where's the mic? That's worth having in the recording.
And it's an awareness practice. That's why it's only 25% awareness of the out-breath. Because it's not a concentration practice where you concentrate on an object like a statue or a candle. So you're aware of the breath leaving your body, but then you're aware of the space around you,
Right.
the space wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's only 25% of the out-breath
Right.
awareness. The rest is spatial. And you keep your eyes open because you want to practice being in the present moment. That's the important part.
And this is a practice, ultimately you can drop the breath and simply rest in the space. And that is pure Vipashyana practice. And that's heading towards Shamatha, Mahamudra, and great perfection. That's the it's the same practice. It doesn't change. That is the core practice, just to rest in the space. The problem is, when we do that, is that oftentimes we get lost and we start thinking a lot. So then you come back to the breath as a way of pulling yourself back into the present moment. But it's very good to let go of the breath altogether and just rest here in the space. And in fact, that's what you do when you're walking down the street. You're coming back, you're not going to work with the breath as you walk down the street or as you drive your car, but you could remind yourself just to come back and rest and be aware in this space.
And also, in terms of your eyes, when you're practicing and you look down, but if you find yourself being drowsy, instead of giving in and falling asleep, just look up, change your gaze, and that wakes you up.
Right.
But maybe we can introduce walking meditation.
We're going to. Just let's finish this material, and we're almost there. Rinpoche doesn't think that counting the breaths is necessary, so we can just dismiss that. In fact, he says your concentration may be weakened by counting the breaths. Jamgon Kongtrul, the great Lodro Thaye, he lived in the late 19th century, recommends that if you really experience the quality of being there, here, there, even if you have difficulty with awareness of breathing, still you have no problem. The idea is that what this practice is all about is coming present, being there or here. That's really the essence of the practice. It's to be here for our lives. And finally, he talks about boredom. And this is a interesting teaching that when we start practicing, we're so full of effort and ambition and confusion that what we often experience as we sit is hot boredom. It's unpleasant, it's irritating, we want the session to be over, we want to get up. But the more we practice and the more we begin to relax, especially, and accept that whatever goes on in our minds is just an expression of the present moment, and that we can use that as part of our practice, then it begins to become cool boredom. And that's so necessary that we get to the stage of cool boredom. He says, unless you keep coming back to the breath, you will not get properly bored. You have to be properly bored. And if you do not get properly bored, you will not be in tune with the power of the practice, with the magic of meditation practice, or the spiritual energy of the lineage. Because ultimately what begins to happen is that these teachings come into us willy-nilly. The more we relax and do less and simply become part of the present moment, these teachings take a life, and they begin, this is the power of the lineage. So it's necessary to develop this cool boredom. That means the ability to just rest here in the present moment. And then the teachings can begin to happen to us. It's as though, we're giving up a personal ambition. And then the teachings take effect. Rinpoche used to call it the power of the lineage coming through. It's all these teachings coming down through the ages, from one and realized practitioner to the next.
Can you repeat that?
The quote?
Yeah.
Unless you keep coming back to the breath, you will not get properly bored. And if you do not get properly bored, and he's talking here about the cool boredom, the relaxed boredom, you will not be in tune with the power of the practice, with the magic of meditation practice, or the spiritual energy of the lineage. So relax, and then it happens. It's like we don't have to do it. It's really a gift. And as we proceed, it becomes cool and refreshing, like a mountain river. Cool boredom is light. It is simply another expression of the experience of well-being, which really is one of the key descriptors for this thing of resting in the natural state, resting in this awareness of space, that there's a sense of well-being that goes through it all. Why? Because we've given up thought, which is all full of anxiety, hope, and fear, mostly fear. And we are just relaxing in this present cool state. And if we're not, it highlights the extent to which we're habitually having repetitive, anxious, self-attacking thoughts. So you see them, you let them go, and you come back to this simple awareness. Rochelle had a great idea, which is that we do walking meditation as well. Has everybody here done walking meditation? Yes. Yes, I think so. So should we do it again?
Yeah, but maybe for the recording.
For the recording? Okay. So the idea is that when you're walking meditation is the idea that when you're sitting for an extended period of time, like we do group practices for a month, and we'll sit alternate periods of sitting and walking meditation for a day, or for many days. You can't just keep sitting continually, and it's not even useful. So we alternate sitting and walking. Today, we have fallen back into the old style of sitting for like 30 minutes and then walking for 10. But you remember in the early days, Trungpa Rinpoche he would create clock watchers by doing it so regularly, 30, 10, 30, 10, 30, 10. So what he did was he just mixed it up. And we'd be sit for 5 minutes, walk for 30. We'd sit for an hour and a half, walk for 15. It just, you never knew what was coming next. But today we mostly sit for regular periods.
And also, like if you were doing it.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
If you were in retreat, like a Karmacholing or Shambhala Mountain Center, then the morning sit from 7 to 8, you would sit, and then like a 7:45, let's say, you go for a walk outside, down the road, across the bridge, or something like that. So you do walking meditation in nature.
And when you do walking meditation, it's still the same idea of 75-25. 75% of your awareness is in the environment, and 25% is on your walk, your body walking. So you're aware of your leg lifting, the heel coming down, the weight transferring to that foot, and the back foot lifting up, swinging, and now the weight coming down on the heel, the weight transferring. That's like the breath. It's the 25%. And you adopt the posture. You want to demonstrate the posture? Well, we'll see. See if this is going to work. We're out of the picture. So the posture is, take your hand, this comes, and this is straight out of the Zen tradition, Lane, obviously. And you take your hand, you bring your thumb down, close your fingers over it, take your other hand, put it like this, you bring it down around around the bottom of your sternum. Your arms aren't out akimbo, they're just relaxed by your side. And then you start walking. And you walk a little bit slower than a normal pace because you're working with awareness. And your awareness is all around you. It's open. It's in the room, just as it is. That's the 75%. And that allows you to navigate. And then the 25% is you're aware of the foot rising, coming down in that motion. So it's the same thing.
And the eyes?
Oh, and the eyes are down at the ground at about a 45-degree angle. Although, as you go along, if you are as long as you're conscious, you can bring them up to the horizontal. And the reason I say as long as you're conscious is that in walking meditation, there is a strong tendency that people have to think vacation time, and they look around and they're checking out the other meditators, and maybe they're looking for someone who's attractive romantically, or they're just having thoughts about the other meditators, and their minds are just going full tilt, and they've completely forgotten the idea of practice. So the idea is that you make this a practice, when you're doing walking meditation, and you bring your mind back to the space, and that 75, and then the 25% on your body moving. So it's good to, sometimes it's good if you're the preceptor, if you're, leading the meditation, to remind people, okay, come back. Be aware of your walking. Be aware of the environment and of your body. Anything else? Anyone want to say? I think that finally, I really like that last statement about the lineage and the power of it coming through. He used to say to us, it works, just do it. I think that is terrific advice. All you have to do is to have a regular practice is ideal. And you just do it, the same simple practice. And then what you'll find, I think everybody here probably already has, is that it begins to bleed into your daily life. You begin to remember more, to come back out of daydream, out of thought, and just flash awareness. That is terrific practice. In fact, that's called, ironically, in the Tibetan tradition, post-meditation practice. But actually, it's the most powerful form of meditation practice. It's just that it's the most difficult. Why? Because as we move through our daily lives, there are all these triggers that set off our habitual, repetitive patterns of thought that we don't have to experience when we're sitting in meditation in our little nook in front of our meditation shrine or whatever we've got. And there we don't have as many triggers. Then it's just our own mind. But as you walk down the street, you see somebody reminds you of somebody else, you see something that reminds you of this, that, brings up all kinds of stuff. So it's harder to come back. But that is the best practice, is to come back during your daily life. It's just that it's really necessary to have a daily practice on a cushion, because if you just try and do meditation in action in your daily life, you will spend years not meditating. Is that it? Should we end? Huh? Oh, do we have the tea?
Yes,
We do. Okay. Well, then here's what we're going to do. Michelle and I are the only ones who know this chant. So this is... Sasha does. Good. And what this is that traditionally, when you have a shrine, you might make an offering to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas on the shrine. You might put, in this case, some tea in a little bowl on the shrine while you practice. And at the end, you say a chant to make the offering. And here's the chant. And here's our chant version of the chant, many different versions. By this, how do we sing? Sorry. No. This offering gift of Dharma, may we yogins with our disciples obtain lordship, freedom from disease, long life, glory, fame, and all great and vast enjoyments. Grant us the cities of the pacifying and enriching actions, and so on. Samaya holders, guard us, support us with all the cities. May there be no untimely death, illness, duns, or obstructing spirits for us. May we have no nightmares, ill omens, or bad dealings. May the world enjoy peace, have good harvests, abundant grain, expansion of Dharma, and glorious auspiciousness. Accomplish whatever mind desires. And then we throw it out. You throw it out. And ideally in New York, you pretty much have to pour it down the drain. But if you're out in the country, the idea is you pour it in a place where human beings don't walk, but the animals might get to it. Oh no, you're not going to put it out the window. I was doing it at home and I got complaints. Okay. But it's got to go to a place where people don't walk, you know. Huh? Okay. And then we chant the dedication of merit, because we're all becoming bodhisattvas. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.